everybody. Hello. Let's make sure we are good to, we are good to go. Hey, everybody. Live from Denver. It is Friday night. And I am joined by my beautiful wife, Melissa.
Hello.
For another episode of Critical Conversations. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. Critics out there, we love you. We are so happy to see you joining us today. What a week, huh? This week flew by for me. I don't know about anybody else, but for me, flew supersonic with like wings and everything. It was Thursday before, I felt like I had blinked and it was Thursday, yesterday. I could not believe it was already that day. Hey, Vancouver. Hey, everybody. Hayden, over, I believe, in the UK. Hey, everybody. Very, very happy to see you. Okay, so let's see. We're going to talk about psychotherapy cults tonight. And this is something I have been learning about. You're getting it straight from the research notes and pull quotes I'm pulling from this book I'm reading right now called Insane Therapy, which details quite an insane history of a specific psychotherapy cult that existed in California called the Center for Feeling Therapy back in the 70s, 1971 to 1980. 9 years. And it was a communal living thing. And there's some details I'll go into on that. Good times all around on that. But before we get to that, let's talk about some lighter things first, like climate change, floods in Germany, fires,
1,000 people
floods,
missing.
Yeah, new COVID variants. California going back on mask mandate apparently in a couple days. So I don't know. I'm so frustrated because apparently what I'm seeing in the headlines, what I'm seeing in reporting, and I don't know, I'm always kind of critical. I'm always a little doubtful, but what is being reported is that that it is mainly the unvaccinated,
yes,
right, who are showing up in the hospitals and showing up with COVID again. And this is even right now before the show, I think. Trending on Twitter right now is pandemic of the unvaccinated, right? Because that's what this kind of is now, and it's very, very clear. And I thought shortly after we got our vaccines, and we were a little late here in Colorado to getting them, so I thought we were a little behind the curve on it. And then find out, no, there's still hundreds of thousands, millions of people who just, refuse, aren't doing it, aren't getting it, are still getting sick, are still dying. Hospitals are filling back up in certain places. And, I don't know, I'm not going to go on a soapbox, but it's like, for Christ's sake, could you just
It just feels like they just won't learn their lesson.
Well, it's what we talk about all the time. It is an adamant refusal. It's a willful ignorance. It's an I know better. And that's what I see a lot of from what I am seeing on social media, which is a tiny percentage of the overall population, but still something you can use as an indicator, I guess, or as some kind of sign of what might be happening in the broader picture. And what I see is a lot of either fear-mongering, a lot of people who are just afraid of it. This vaccine is an experimental vaccine, and that means it's not the real thing, and and you can't trust the government anyway, and Fauci, Louchy, whatever, and
Fauci, ouchie.
Yeah, Fauci, ouchie, and and then of course there is, just as Michelle says, just plain selfishness, which I agree with. I know that is absolutely part of what's going on out there. The misinformation, of course, is rife, and people will glom on to the misinformation to reinforce or confirm their bias or back up how they already feel. And if they feel distrustful, if they feel fearful, if they feel like they can't trust authorized sources or science or whatever, and there's a lot of people out there apparently who feel that way, then this is what we see. And really, I'm upset only because of the unnecessary loss of life.
Yes.
If there's anything that is the reason or cause for my upset, it is that people are dying unnecessarily. People are going to die no matter what I say. No matter what you say, what anybody says, that's just a fact of life. But when it's unnecessary, when it's stupid, when it's a Darwin Award kind of death, there's no happiness or joy in that. That's just stupid, and I really don't want that for people. So I hope that we can, I don't know. I just hope anybody who's watching this show and is paying attention to my channel and what I'm trying to do, it takes this to heart. We're both fully vaccinated, and I'm going to tell you right now that I am 100% positive. I can't point to any evidence, of course, but I am positive that all of the Fox News commentators are vaccinated.
Oh my God, they would have to be at this point.
Yeah, and yet, they're sitting there on camera talking about how vaccines are unnecessary and are actually even potentially damaging or destructive, which is just so unbelievably horrible to me that kind of thing is getting airplay to millions of people who lap it up. That really bothers me. Okay, so enough of my soapboxing on that. Let's check in with Seven, because we got Seven Cam, and it's up close and personal this week. We managed to get him. This is on Mel's desk, and I just kind of snuck right up there and put the camera there, and he just seemed to kind of not notice it, which is really good. So anyway, there's our little furry bundle of love sitting there, and he sits there a lot of the day. Yes,
he does.
He'll spend time there.
Likes to hang out with me.
Yeah, our little cutie. So, all right. So there's our Seven. There's our first Seven Cam check-in there. A Zorg floppy disk for IBM. Cool.
Wow.
Yeah. This shirt is, for those who don't know, this is a Fifth Element movie reference. Zorg was the evil corporation and dark bad guy who was doing the darkness's bidding. Gary
Oldman?
Oldman played him. Yeah, love that. Love that role. Love that movie. Okay. All right, let's talk about psychotherapy cults. I guess we should get into it, huh?
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's pretty wild, Jerry. Okay. I brought some notes from for some things I wanted to go over. There's a weird sort of thing still going on with me a little bit with this study, with this work that I'm doing, this master's program of imposter syndrome with you guys. There really is. It's still a little bit of a thing with me. Thank you for that super chat, Alex. Awesome. Numbers shooting up in Spain, especially Barcelona. Catalonia has asked Madrid for permission to go into curfew again. Trying to get an appointment for the vaccine this weekend for both of us. Alex, please. Yes, definitely please get vaccinated. I want you to stay safe out there. Wow. Okay. Yeah, Keith, I addressed Ron Sr.'s passing last week, by the way, Ron Miscavige Sr. That was very sad. Okay. Imposter syndrome. So I'm talking, I'm starting to be aware of the fact that there's this high level of knowledge, or medium level of knowledge, maybe is how I would describe it, that I'm kind of exposed to in my program. And there's a lot of words and terminology and concepts and, history and stuff connected with a lot of this. And when you go deep in, to do the research, to do the paper writing that I'm doing, and to do the lecture and understand what they're talking about, then you get into some pretty interesting stuff, when you're into this field. And this is psychology. This is the field that I am getting this degree in, is a psychology Master's of Science degree. So I haven't really given myself permission to think of myself as somebody who is professionally educated in this subject yet, though. So bear with me a little bit, because the reason I say all this is because I'm struggling a little bit to try to be a communicator with this and not overload or give you guys too much or put too heavy, weird terminology or concepts down or anything. And some of where I'm pulling this information from is from a book. This Insane Therapy book is by somebody who actually analyzes this psychotherapy cult and what they were doing psychologically to these people and how damaging it was. Excuse me. So let me tell you guys about this. And the other burden of this is acknowledging that there are licensed therapists, people who are acknowledged, educated professionals who have gone to school, gotten their training, done internships, done mentoring, whatever, who go completely whack and are either sociopaths the entire time, I don't know, or get some power trip going, get some, you can have, there really isn't any golden rule anywhere that says narcissists can apply to and get psychology training or psychiatry training, just like any other field. And if you have somebody who is into power plays and power trips and exerting their authority over others, get into this field, then you can end up with somebody who can do some really significant damage. There was at least one woman in this Center for Feeling Therapy group, which was disbanded, by the way, in 1980, and in a landmark case, a bunch of the patients, a bunch of the people who were there filed suit. I'm gonna skip to the end first, just to get you guys know there is a happy ending here in that this particular group and the psychotherapists or the counselors and psychologists who were heading it up all had their licenses revoked and taken away in a very spectacular fashion and very public fashion. Unfortunately, what I don't know yet and don't understand is why criminal charges were not brought against them. I suspect that it had something to do with the fact that the people they had assaulted, both physically, sexually, as well as psychologically, were in such bad shape that they just weren't, down for bringing a criminal case. I don't know yet. Or maybe there wasn't evidence, or maybe there were contracts, or maybe, there could have been a multiplicity of reasons why criminal charges weren't brought. But I really feel there was an injustice there. I think that these guys, first guy, Richard Corrier, I think was one of them, and there were two others. These guys really should have gone to jail for what they did. 9 years of abuse. And and let me tell you about this. There was, if any of you guys have ever heard of Primal Scream.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, what do you know about Primal Scream?
Just a little bit. I know it was like some crazy thing where people were like, trying to go back to their childhood and relive traumas, and there was screaming involved.
That's right. That's basically it. This guy Janov came up with it. Now, Primal Scream was its own little psychotherapeutic cult, as far as I'm concerned. Very culty, very our way or the highway, right? There's all the characteristics, all the check boxes that we talk about. These groups do check these boxes, and it's so disturbing. So like, for example, what they would do is these guys were an offshoot of Primal Scream. There were these three main first founding members who left Primal Scream and said Janov, the guy who came up with Primal Scream and wrote the book on it and was having all this success with it in the 60s and 70s, they were there as part of his thing, and they went, this isn't really what this isn't. Janov was promising cures. This is back in the 70s, 60s, and 70s when they still were promoting that we're going to cure you of your neurosis. We're going to cure you of your psychosis or your depression or whatever.
Yeah, we're doing weird abusive things.
Well, yeah, Primal Scream was this therapy that was put out there, and it was supposed to be 6 to 9 months, and you'd be cured. That was the claim, and Janov was very specific about that. Well, turns out these guys were doing that, and it wasn't curing, people at that rate, and it was creating other problems, and they saw issues with it, correctly so, and they decided, well, we're going to go off and do our own thing, and they did the Center for Feeling Therapy, and they called it Feeling Therapy. This was a proposal from them that they thought they were onto something, or at least they were talking about it as though it was a valid alternative to the psychiatric, psychological, medical model. That not the first time that claim has been made. There's even a whole system out now that challenges the medical model. So this was what they thought they were doing or promoting, and they said that what they had was this new idea or this new understanding of sanity and insanity, and what it had to do with feeling or emotion and releasing of trauma, a la Primal Scream. But in order for this to work, it had to really be done through this 3-week intensive process, one-on-one with one of these therapists, one of these feeling therapists. And after the 3-week intensive, followed up with communal living. Now, not necessarily 24/7, you're stuck in a room with all these other people kind of living. These people still had jobs, had to make a living because they were putting the money back into the center. And so they ended up buying a property in the middle of town with some houses. They knocked out walls so they'd have a sort of communal setup. Then they bought some houses around that. And so couples and individuals were getting into these groups or into this group, this feeling therapy group. And it's a little hard for me to describe or kind of, where to start with this as far as what they were doing. But, one thing that is particularly damaging that I'll point out about psychotherapists or counselors or even coaches, but I think really when you get to the level of 4, 6, 8 years of education and licensing, and you have this framework of what you think is protection, and it should be. That's why the framework exists, is to protect the patients and protect the practitioners. It's both. You go in thinking all of this framework is in place, and so here's this person who you have a reasonable expectation that you're going to be helped, or at least you're not going to be hurt. That it's going to be a situation of, physician do no harm, right? That you're at least going to get that. And instead, what these folks got into and walked into was a situation where, imagine walking into the room and you're going to go do this therapy, you're going to go get this intensive, and you walk in and there's a one-on-one, so you're there with your therapist, this feeling therapist, and you say, and he sits down, you sit down, and he's like, okay, what's, how you doing, what's going on? And you say, oh, well, I've got this problem and that problem, or I'm really introverted and upset and I don't know what to do. And the response from the therapist is to stand up and slap you across the face and tell you to stop lying. Right? This was actually like a formalized kind of process that they engaged in, this sort of conflict encounter method. And they would slug people. They called it sluggotherapy. There was direct punching, hitting, slapping. There were instances, many instances apparently, of exposure therapy where patients were made to strip down and talk about the most intimate details of their bodies, embarrassing things, etc. And apparently the weirdness of this is, and as it got into the communal group situation, after the 3-week intensive, you would have Tuesday and Thursday nights would be these group meetings, these support group sort of things. Now, people are living with each other who are doing this therapy, and it's being encouraged that they mix and mingle with people that they don't particularly like or don't get along with or don't know. And they're supposed to also start practicing this feeling therapy on each other.
Oh, geez.
So what you have is a real Lord of the Flies kind of situation develop very, very quickly. And by that, I mean group abuse of the group itself, physically, sexually, etc. And this went on for years, and they rolled through different forms of therapy over the years. They went from this feeling therapy to dream analysis therapy and dream analysis, and then some other symbolic stuff. So that every year or two or three, they would sort of roll out these new ideas and new therapy processes. And the most amazing thing about this is a good chunk of their clients, their patients, the people who were reporting there and showing up there and living there, or staying around this and hanging around this for years were themselves trained psychotherapists and psychologists. So you really gotta just own this idea that education and intelligence ain't got nothing to do with whether you're going to get sucked into one of these groups or not, or whether you are susceptible or vulnerable to thought reform or psychological manipulation resulting in physical and even sexual manipulation and abuse. None of us have some magic suit of armor and no amount of degrees or titles or, anything is going to necessarily be a shield for you.
Nope.
It is unbelievable to me how I have to learn this lesson over and over again, but it's part of what I do. So, anyway, so that's kind of a little bit of an overview of the situation. There's lots and lots of details, and one of the things I wanted to go over was the fact that, our expectations. I mean, just to talk about this in terms of what can I take from this, from reading this absolutely horrible, awful stuff about what trained psychotherapists or psychologists would do with their authority when they could lord it over others. How can I take that and do something that communicates something helpful or useful to you guys? Well, one of the points of analysis of this had to do with the kind of expectations we have coming into a group situation. And this, when you go, and this has everything to do also, by the way, with religious groups, which are not psychotherapy cults. That's a kind of a different kind of abuse set, right? You can have spiritually abusive groups or religiously abusive groups, and religious abuse and spiritual abuse are actually categorized forms of abuse that you can look up. And there's even laws about religious abuse. So I bring that up because religion's another big area, as well as psychology or psychotherapy, where you have somebody who's coming in with preformed expectations. And this makes it a little different, just a little different, but significant enough that it's different from something like Scientology, where maybe you saw a commercial or somebody mentioned something to you about it, or even a family or friend told you how great it was, but you're really not going in there with the same kind of understanding and expectations you have if you say we're walking into a church and talking to a priest or a minister. You have ideas of what this is going to look and sound like and what the behavior is going to be like, what you're going to run into. And you have expectations of what you're not going to run into, right? Same with therapists, right? With doctors. And there's a lot of societal, like I said, expectations, baggage, whatever you want to call it, lore, mysticism, and knowledge and information. So that kind of makes this a little bit different in an interesting way. But it also might help us, me, to realize that those expectations that we have, that we carry around with us, are really arbitrary. They're just something that was kind of fed to us by the society that we live in. They're not necessarily true for every individual situation you're going to run into. Generally speaking, doctors can be trusted. Generally speaking, priests and ministers, I believe, can be trusted. That's my own personal take on it, right? But you don't know.
You don't know which one is the one that can't be.
Exactly. One for one, you don't know, right? So you can have that general understanding or that general expectation, but that can serve to be a bit of a blindfold if you're not keeping what you might call, I think what pilots and military people call situational awareness.
Oh, yeah.
Right? In other words, keep your eyes open, right? Look around, listen, watch for red flags. I tweeted something this week that I'll repeat here, which is that after all this study, I'm almost 10 years into this now. Right. I mean, I'm pretty far along on getting out. Not 10 years. I guess, what am I, 8 years out of Scientology, right? And having my head deep in this stuff most of that time. It's so funny that the best advice I know how to give is to listen to that little voice in the back of your head.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that little voice that tells you something's wrong, something's not right here. There's a red flag. There's a little ding, 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 that little alarm bell, that little gut feeling. Listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always right.
Nope.
My point is that it is not that your little voice or your gut feeling is always right. It's going to be wrong a ton of times. But what we call that little voice or what we call that gut feeling is your subconscious brain
Picking something up.
Yes, exactly, or picking up a number of things, and you're not necessarily consciously aware of what those little things are, but there's something there. And if you would listen to that voice and just fact check on, apply some critical thinking, right? Ask some questions. If it looks too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. That whole thing, right? It stands as this pillar of wisdom of advice to listen to yourself and not invalidate yourself or tell yourself, say, because of societal expectations, because of familial expectations, relationship expectations. Those can be very pressuring. Those can be very powerful motivations to not listen to that voice, to not make waves, to not stand up and ask a question. I know, believe me, I know. But, had people in this situation that I'm describing with this feeling therapy done that, had other people done that. And it's in this one, it's a fairly significant red flag when your therapist is slapping you across the face.
Oh my God.
At this point, any therapist who even tried something like that, in the 70s, people were getting away with stuff that they're not going to get away with now.
No way.
Not
in this country.
Unless, though, I'm going to stress something, though. Unless you as the patient let them get away with it. Because if you don't report it, then they are going to get away with it, right? If the person who is the victim of that abuse doesn't stand up for themselves, doesn't report that abuse, then they do get away with it. But the point is there are laws and that framework that I talk about with the licensing and the interning and all that work that gets done is done to prevent this exact kind of situation from happening ever again. So you have a framework in place in the world of psychotherapy, in the world of counseling in America at least, and in the UK as well. You have protections, but not if you don't take advantage of and use them. And that requires overcoming some of those societal expectations and, in other words, peer pressure, right? To do that. So I wanted to kind of harp on that a little bit because it's a very practical piece of advice I could share to try to, and it's easy if you can just remember to do it and have the gumption to do it in the moment, Yeah, Cynthia, I think you're absolutely right. I think women in particular ignore that instinct to be polite. I hope that is changing. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm harping on this, right? Is because it needs to change. We need to own that we have some say in the course and direction of our lives and be willing to speak up on that, even in the face of an authority figure. Now, this is interesting because, I say something like that and you can take it out of context and go, well, that's why I'm not getting vaccinated, Chris, because I'm not listening to those authority figures. And I'm going, no. No, find out, right? And in the course of finding out, you'll find out the vaccines are very good, right? And there's nothing wrong with them. In the course of finding out whether a psychotherapist...
Well, review your sources,
Well, exactly.
Who am I getting this information from, and can I trust this information from this source?
Exactly. If you're getting your medical advice from Fox News,
That's not a good source.
Maybe there might be a better resource, right? Breitbart... Daily Stormer. Maybe not. Okay. So, yeah. So this social thing is actually kind of a big deal, especially in group situations, which is why I wanted to really put that out there. Okay. All right. Now we're about halfway along, and this is excellent. I do want to say, by the way, that I'm going to keep going on this, but if you want to call in and talk about this, 984-214-4154. I'm more than happy to be interrupted for that. Okay. Couple points, though, while we're going that I did want to continue with. This is my I pulled up my little document here, pull quotes from the book and stuff. Yeah. Oh, okay. Here's another red flag for you. Okay. This is a direct quote from the book from Insane Therapy. All their works exhibit the same attitude toward their therapy. It alone is authentic and worthwhile. Okay? All their works exhibit the same attitude toward their therapy. It alone is authentic and worthwhile. In other words, we're the only guys who have the answers. It alone is authentic and worthwhile. We have the only worthwhile, the only authentic therapy anywhere. If you ever hear a claim like that of any kind, anywhere in the medical profession, run, don't walk away from that situation. Because that is simply not true. There is no situation in psychotherapy and psychology, certainly, where there is only one mode or method of therapy that applies to any case.
Especially not broadly, like, oh, we can help anyone. Well,
exactly.
Everyone's a little different when it comes to therapy and what you need, and what style works for you.
That's right. That's exactly right. And there are a ton of different modes of therapy, different kinds of things that can be done, and different approaches. And really, at this point in time, with the state of the field being what it is, I can say with a little bit of authority now that if you're not getting a real custom program for you with your therapist for your needs in your context for your life, then you're really getting a disservice. Because psychotherapy and psychology and psychiatry, these are not factory line, automated processes.
Right.
They're just not. There's no way that you can, open up somebody's life and open up their mind and start poking around and think you're going to do that on a one-size-fits-all basis. That's literally impossible. I'll just go out and say that, at least under current methodology and the current state of the field. Okay. It just does not work that way. So any therapy, any psychological approach, any psychiatric approach that says we have the one way and the only way to deal with this problem that you have or issue you have, and don't listen to those other guys because they don't really know what the hell they're talking about. They're the destructive ones. Like I said, run, don't walk in the opposite direction from that. Because the only people who say crap like that are people who are trying to take advantage of and leverage you and your belief in them so that you will glom onto them as the only source of help or assistance to you. And this gets really bad really fast. It has the potential to take your life completely off the rails very quickly. So watch out for that. Okay. I'm just gonna check in on the comments. I haven't looked at the comments in a little bit here. Yeah, fundamentalism at its best. That's right. Yeah. Okay. Cool, guys. All right. Let's see a couple other points here. Yeah, and I wanted to be a little critical of psychology and psychotherapy a little bit for a second because there's a quote here that sort of highlights the reason why. Later observers can see the founders' claims, the founders of the Center for Feeling Therapy is the founder she's talking about here. Certain kinds of organizations have traditionally prohibited open dissent, most especially religious and political groups, but also psychotherapy schools. The history of the discipline from Freud onward is rife with schisms, after which new schools of therapy coalesce around dissenters. Janov's Primal Institute, the primal scream thing, in asserting its brand of therapy as the cure for neurosis and psychosis, seems a likely candidate for generating splinter groups. Such was the case with the founders of feeling therapy. Okay, so that's when you treat psychotherapy or when you treat science like religion with denominations,
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think that's a really good thing personally. I think we need to do better, but it's human behavior. I understand that. It's more of a sociologically modeled problem. You know what I mean? In any group, you're going to have leaders and you're going to have dissenters, and if they're not allowed to have their say and modify and change the movement of the activity, then they're going to go off and do their own thing. And this is why we have 1,000 different denominations of Christianity right now, all springing from Protestant Catholicism from Western Europe back in the day. So, schism. And this has happened as well in the field of psychotherapy or psychology. So, remember, I say this actually to try to take the authority of these individuals down a notch. People who have training as psychologists and therapists have specialized training and they should be listened to, but they're human. Never, ever forget that. There's no one in this field who has a mastery of the human mind or the human condition or emotion or thought or cognitive processes or, how you should be living your life. There is no one answer to that. I'm just going to keep harping on that because I think that's really important. Okay. Oh, yeah. And of course, one of the things about these groups, which I wanted to point out, and this is true of all groups, but, again, when you have that authority level raised, it kind of becomes a little bit more important. The Center for Feeling Therapy is only one of many such organizations, ranging from religious to political to therapeutic to commercial, which promise identity, meaning, intimacy, and community to individual participants. Those are probably the four of the most powerful motivators that human beings have. Mm-hmm. We have a whole branch of political activity called identity politics, which centers around giving identity or reinforcing identity. Excuse me. This is powerful stuff. Meaning, intimacy, right? Closeness, relationships. Mm-hmm. This is why it's kind of like when you get into a psychotherapy cult or a pseudotherapy cult like Scientology, and you're opening yourself up. You're opening yourself up like a little flower, like wide open. You are trusting these people, right? And you're doing it because you're trying to find, or there is a promise of, clarification and help with identity, meaning, intimacy, and community. And these guys, the psychotherapy cults, specialize in making it a group activity. So the feeling of community is very, very, very strong, right? And we really do crave that at a very basic level. So anyway, just wanted to put that out there. All right. Yeah, exactly. Good ones and bad ones. Mm-hmm. Yeah, these guys published a few books and stuff. That's right. It was psychological fitness. That was the other thing. They went from the dream therapy crap to this psychological fitness thing where they started comparing it to physical fitness. And they were going to get you tuned up psychologically by, of course, abusing the crap out of you. Feeling therapy made its appeal to persons who were attracted to primal therapy and who had some knowledge of it through Janov's books. Once it attracted them, however, it had to differentiate itself from primal therapy and argue that it was new and better.
Of course.
It made these claims by rejecting the notion of a cure. Yeah, we're not going to cure. This is going to be an ongoing process that you're going to do for a good long time.
There's something about in humans where if you say it's new and better, they get all excited. And it's also true when you say it's like ancient technique.
Yes. Ancient Chinese secret, huh? That's right.
Those two things get people excited. I don't know why.
Well, it's weird also how the old becomes the new again is sort of this this weird idea, you know, this old idea. Okay, so they rejected the notion that Janov had put forward that they were going to cure you within 6 to 9 months. That was gotten rid of, and adopting the idea of therapeutic community. See, in this group, this was part and parcel of the whole concept of what the therapy was going to consist of. And by the way, the therapists live there too. So, and they took the walls out even to the bathrooms. So you could see people doing everything. And that was actually put forward as a feature, not a bug. This is a confession culture. These people were confessing to each other all the time. Their impure thoughts, their impure feelings. And what they didn't use the word impure, they used the word insane. You were insane until your feeling therapist made you sane. And it was only your feeling therapist who could make you sane. Everything in the outside world was designed to make you insane. And this center for feeling therapy was the place where a new civilization was being created.
Oh, a new civilization.
Yeah, sound familiar? It should, because that's exactly what we thought we were doing in Scientology, right? And it's what the Hare Krishnas think. It's what the Moonies think. It's whatever all these groups think. They all think they're building a new civilization. So you can have that in a pseudo-therapeutic, quasi-religious setting like Scientology or Hare Krishnas or something, but you can also have that in a completely science, quote-unquote, oriented environment, which has nothing to do with religion at all. And I really wanted to highlight that to you guys, because it's, that situational awareness that I want you guys to, do or give yourselves or put there for yourselves is not just something you have to have. You don't just have to have your hackles up when the ministers are around or the gurus are around. It's kind of a full life thing. Maybe I should start my own cult with that.
Well, we can make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. We'll call it situational awareness. We'll call it the situational awareness group. The SAGs. We'll be the SAGs. We're gonna sag. We're gonna sag our way to freedom. There we go. Okay. Oh yeah, this is another thing about this is that there's an attitude that is subtle but important when it comes to getting therapy of any kind, whether deep or shallow or whatever. And that is the relationship and the positioning of the therapist. And I believe this applies very much to any kind of coaching or life coaching or therapy or counseling you're going to get. Here's a quote from the book I'm reading. Accordingly, a picture emerges of a group of individuals engaged in intensive interaction with all members of the group, including therapists and other patients. In this picture, the therapist is essential and not incidental to the outcome of the process. I remember I also mentioned that, it's only a feeling therapist that can make you sane, right? It's only the therapist in this situation who, through his presence and knowledge and skill and ability, is going to make you sane, is going to make you better. Well, I'd like to point out that that's absolutely backwards from any valid, legit psychological therapy, okay? You're the source of your assistance and help and recovery, not your psychologist or psychotherapist. You are the one who's doing the work. They are guiding you, they are assisting you, they are helping you. But if they are dominating you or commanding you, making you feel grossly uncomfortable, I can't say uncomfortable because therapy is by its nature uncomfortable at times. So it can, so there's going to be some rough spots in any kind of therapy where you're not going to feel so great. That's not necessarily a red flag. But if your therapist is the one and only person who could possibly help you with this, something's gone out of whack. Something's out of balance. No one person should ever hold that kind of power over you, especially not a therapist. Okay. Yeah, and there's a bit of analysis that was done on this group where it was made pretty clear that these guys were our way or the highway types. And so they never even once considered that what they were doing was wrong or could have any negative consequences or outcome. Not once did they ever doubt themselves or what they were doing, at least not in any written or testimonial way. And like I said, that whole attitude, I mean, even if you have had a career of flawless perfection as a therapist, guys come to you, women come to you, kids come to you, and you're just popping them off, and people are happy and doing great. Well, you can pump yourself up on your ego a bit, but any legit therapist is going to know the very next case could be the one that's not going to get cracked, or the one that might have some difficulties, or the one that might need, most importantly, might need a different kind of approach or a different kind of therapy than what this individual can offer. And if all this person has is the hammer, then everybody's going to look like the nail, right? So anyway, that's just an important thing to pay attention to there. And I think those are all the points I wanted to make on that.
All right.
How are we doing on the comments? Because I've only been cruising through.
We're talking about doing a Sliders or Black Mirror episode where Scientology becomes a major world religion.
Oh, wait, what was that?
They were joking about, a Sliders or Black Mirror episode becoming the...
Oh God, yes. I would love to see that. I'll tell you what it would look like, an awful lot like North Korea. That's what a Scientology world would actually look like. Yeah.
And here's a good question from Debbie. Chris, what does it take for a person to heal? Is it even a reasonable expectation?
Great question, Debbie. Yeah. What I can say from my non-licensed, non-professional point of view about this, and from my own personal experience with it, okay, is I believe that recovery consists of, acknowledging what's occurred, understanding, coming to a new understanding of what's occurred. I believe it's very, very important in any recovery process to understand what trauma is, what the nature of the thing you're trying to recover from. Well, what is it? This is why I always push education and psychoeducation so hard. In order to heal thyself, you have to know thyself a little bit. And you have to be willing to take some blinders off, and you have to be willing to be wrong, and you have to be willing to look at the mistakes that you've made and acknowledge them as mistakes, and not meaning that not use that acknowledgement of those mistakes to further drive yourself or push yourself down or into the mud or think you're horrible and awful, but to acknowledge the mistakes from a point of empowerment, from, okay, I screwed up then, I don't have to screw up again. I made those mistakes and I've learned from them so that I don't have to do that in the future, and I can change that behavior. And I think that's about as much recovery as any of us could possibly ask for, is can you change the behavior? Can you do something different when faced with the same situation again so that you don't end up in that mess again? That's what I strive for, at least. That's what I've been pushing for years with myself, and it's been working. Through critical thinking education, through cult education, through psychological education, I am definitely never, ever going to get wrangled into one of these goddamn groups again. That's a mistake I'm not going to make. And I will make plenty of mistakes, but that's not going to be one of them, right? And I'm quite sure about that, but not to the point that I'm so sure that I stop looking or stop paying attention. If anything, that's the change, is that I am paying attention now, and I wasn't before, So, yeah, there you go, Debbie. So there's some stuff to think about there. Exactly. Healing is a very personal term when it comes to psychology. It's enormously personal. It's very, very context specific to each person and what their desires are, because we all come from such different places.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we come from different places culturally, we come from different places educationally. So our understanding of ourselves, our desires, our needs and wants for ourselves are going to be really different. So what I think is important for my recovery is just food for thought for your recovery. It's not, you know, how I define it for myself should just be something that gives you some thinking so you can figure out for yourself what it is. That's where we're at right now. You know, there is no, you know, auditing. There's no factory line. There's no assembly production, you know, way of treating people that is going to just, you know, evil spirits be out. It doesn't work that way. Hey, Steve. Awesome, man. All right. We are, wow, I guess, okay. Now, we didn't do any calls this week.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's fine. I will say in the last bits of the show here, 984-214-4154 if you want to call in. We do have some things. Yes, please do give me those thumbs up.
We didn't do another 7-cam.
Oh, my God. Yes. Do we need to do this one?
Oh.
There he is. Okay.
I'll get him asleep.
Now, does he actually do that while you're working?
Yeah.
He just falls asleep.
Mm-hmm. He just falls asleep. Or he'll get up and start walking around and get in my way.
Yeah, just walk right across the keyboard.
Yeah.
Of course. Our little bundle of furry love.
Yes.
That is #7 the Wonder Cat, by the way, if you're going to refer to him on social media. I someday I will get that trending. Yeah, there you go, Debbie. That's right. Those are good things. Yeah, I know. This show just flew by. I had some things to say, but I didn't know how long it was going to take. But, you know, this is what I immerse myself in all day. And it's a little rough, to be honest with you, reading about some of this stuff. Because I did not pull out the most salacious bits for you guys, right? There were truly nasty, horrible things that these guys did to people. There was a man who was made to, I mean, just to show how far off the rails this can go, okay? Because you don't imagine that something could go this off the rails. But here's how bad it got at that Center for Feeling Therapy is grown men were made to wear diapers and eat baby food for a month at a time because he was acting like a baby and wouldn't stop acting like a baby and needed to grow up. And so this was the object lesson to make him do that. For a month, this guy had to crawl around on all fours and act like a baby. Wow. I mean, it's just humiliating. Of course, there was the stripping and the body imaging insults. And there were many, many instances of people being slapped and punched hard in order to wake them up, get them to snap to, get them to have a real feeling, get them to really express themselves for real. You know, all this kind of crap. And none of these people who were being given this treatment had been given any explanation for why it was happening. There were lectures that were very broad, very general about how the therapy worked that were given in group settings, but these individuals were never given any actual direction or instruction other than this abusive crap. So they were constantly trying to figure out why they were having to do these assignments or why they were getting beat on or why this was happening to them, and had to come up with their own reasons or figure it out in their group or with amongst each other. And meanwhile, they are doing this to each other, modeling the behavior that the psychiatrist or psychologist was doing. Not psychiatrists. None of these guys were psychiatrists. They were psychologists. So really, really, really off the rails stuff. And anyway, I'm just harping on that for a minute because I wanted to get across to you guys. I mean, this was bad. This was really, really bad. And again, licensed therapists and psychologists were some of these people who were being abused. And they never thought, wait a second.
Yeah.
You know, some people actually left and then came back.
Wow.
I mean, this was really wild. This was a really wild scene. Now, we have a call-in, so I'm going to take this. Hello.
Well, yes. They have, I notice a lot of these cults have one thing in common. They love to complain about all these problems, but none of them offer any real solutions.
Not solutions that work.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got a lot of solutions. It's just their solutions don't work so good.
No problem. These anti-gun freaks. They love to complain about it, but when you they have a toilet mouth because whenever you ask them, what's the answer, when they open their mouth, but the crap just goes flying out.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, all right. Thanks, Mark.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye, man.
Bye-bye.
Funny guy.
Yeah.
I like Mark. All right. Yeah, BDSM cult. See, it kind of sounds like it now. I mean, in the 70s, that wasn't a thing. They were thinking about it in different ways.
I think that BDSM was probably around, but it just
was, Yeah, but I just I don't think in the 70s psychology still thought of that as deviancy in a lot of ways.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, Gina, good point. A big red flag for me is when people react negatively to being criticized or having their sources criticized. Yeah, that's true. The reaction of that can definitely be a red flag. I've made that mistake a couple times. How dare you question me? But you're right. You're absolutely right. It is a red flag. People who are engaged in, actual back and forth, and certainly somebody who is engaged in a therapy role, should never be on the defensive with you and feeling like, your questions are out of bounds or out of line, or how dare you question me. That would be so inappropriate in any therapeutic setting at this point in time. The 70s were a little weirder. That was a long time ago, but you just do not. It wasn't okay then, and it's not okay now. I'm just saying that the professionally, they've definitely come to acknowledge that is the case. Okay, CX Cyan, we're gonna wrap up here in just a minute. Okay, Keith, I'm going to say real fast on your question about Marty Rathbun. No, not Scientology sleeper, just a guy who left the cult. Nobody knows really what's up with that guy. So first off, let me just say nobody has a clue except Marty and the church what the hell is going on with him. Okay, he disconnected from everybody. Long before he started making these weird videos attacking Leah and Mike and other people. So all we can surmise is that something got to him. Somehow the church got to him. What they did to do that could have been, the carrot, and it could have been the stick, or it could have been both. Hard to say without more information. Okay, so that's kind of what we know about that. Oh, a simulcast at Twitch. Yeah, I got to figure it out though, man. That's a good point, Mark. I would like to broadcast to more channels if I could. I got to get my, I got to get up with the tech and how that stuff works. So thank you for mentioning that. I will definitely work on that. Okay, let's go ahead and start wrapping up. Couple things. Do you have something?
No.
Okay, so we have podcast tomorrow, a little bit different this week. I have interviewed a woman who lives in Australia. Her name is Zara Kay, and she is the founder of a group called Faithless Hijabi. And she is, I think, the first ex-Muslim I've ever had on my channel. And she's a wonderful woman, and she has a powerful story to tell about how she was arrested in Africa when she went back home. She was born and raised in Tanzania. And she had a bit of an ordeal just this last year in Tanzania. And so we go over her whole story, how she became an ex-Muslim, and what Faithless Hijabi is, because it's the organization that she started to help ex-Muslim women out of that situation. So I hope you guys will check that podcast out. That's tomorrow. And we're going to be doing a live critical Q&A this week on Sunday. It's time. So you guys will see me here, right here again on Sunday. I think we'll probably do it at 11 a.m. or noon. I haven't decided yet. I'll post it up on Twitter and on my Facebook page. And so that all being said, let us check the cards. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to have last week, I think we've done enough of these shows that we're going to have repeats. So we might cover something we've covered before. Oh, well.
Oops, I pulled 2.
Okay.
We haven't used... I don't think we've used either of those. Maybe we've used this one.
Okay, we will do this one. Your bias. This is a deck of cards that consist of logical fallacies and cognitive biases. Okay? I'm not getting paid anything to promote these cards, by the way. Reached out to the company to ask them about that, and they never got back to me. But these are so good. Your bias is sunk cost fallacy. You irrationally cling to things that have already cost you something. When we've invested our time, money, or emotion into something, it hurts to let it go. Ask yourself, had I not already invested something, would I still do so now? Right? If you can kind of nullify that sunk cost idea and get out, while the getting's good sort of thing, which sometimes applies and sometimes doesn't. It all depends on the situation. But sunk cost fallacy is absolutely something we've talked about as one of the reasons why people stay in Scientology for so long, because they pay so much money, invest so much time and energy into it, that they feel that it would be, all that would be a waste and I just walk away. No way. I got to keep sticking with it. I got to keep going. They keep telling me the next step will give it to me. That is sunk cost fallacy. So, all right, guys. Thanks a lot for all of your comments and your super chats. Very, very much appreciated. And I will see you this weekend.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.